Hello, my name is Rain and welcome to my channel where I discuss Fantasy Formula 1. The sprint qualifying has concluded, so it's time to actually decide what to do with my disaster of an F1 fantasy team. I know some of you have been waiting for this one. I apologize that this is later in the weekend. The reason for that, one, I'm still in Melbourne, Australia, so setup is a bit messed up, but I've been posting other videos within the setup, so hopefully you've seen those already. The other reason, and the main reason why this video is so late, is because I have had no idea what to actually do with my team, right? I've been looking at it. I've had a horrible start to the season. Horrible start to the season. I don't even want to look where I'm at on the global rank. Not that it really matters. A lot of people had bad weekends in Australia. So for that reason, I have kind of just avoided looking at my own F1 fantasy team and mainly tried to make tips around like more general ideas. But now that we have the sprint qualifying results, what a sprint qualifying, by the way, let's go Hamilton. It's time to look at my team and decide what to do. Before we do that though, tomorrow before the sprint race, I will be live with the deadline stream. The deadline stream is back, proper deadline stream, 2 hours before the deadline, and I think it's going to be a busy one. I'm going to be rating all your teams, giving you tips on what to do. So if you are like me, you've been like me this entire week, and you still don't know what to do with your team in particular, join me for the deadline stream 2 hours before the sprint starts, wherever that is in the world. So let's actually look at my team then. This is my team one. It's the one we're going to focus on. It's the one I'm going to focus on. It's the team that did perform the best, points-wise at least. I had Piastri, which obviously had a spin, lost out on a couple points. Ocon, the only driver that I had that increased in price for 0.2 million. Still decently happy to own him. You have Jack Doohan, Hadjar, and Bortoleto, which in my opinion are all must sell, must get rid of assets unless it's someone you're holding for a long time and you're willing to eat that 0.6 million price drop for an additional week. All of them very likely to drop in price. And then I had Mercedes and Ferrari. Mercedes and Ferrari look fine. I think the constructor pairings of Ferrari and Mercedes aren't bad at all. The problem with Ferrari Mercedes is that the budget cost of having two premium constructors currently makes it difficult for me to make moves with my other assets. So what have been my options throughout this week? Well, the main one with two free transfers has been to just sell Jack Doohan because I do have I do have a little bit of money in the bank, and get Nico Hülkenberg in there. Considering where Nico Hülkenberg starting in the sprint, he went out in SQ1. And considering he's very likely to increase in price as long as he doesn't DNF both races, Hülkenberg could literally DNF in one of the two races, in either the sprint or the main race. As long as he gets a few points in the other one, he's going to increase the maximum price again. I feel like he is the most must-have essential option, and it's super easy to switch to him from one of those cheaper assets that DNF'd in Australia. But obviously this leaves me with 0.1 million in the bank, meaning that Hadjar and Bortoleto I'm stuck with. So the first option was to just roll a transfer, eat the 0.6 million drop on Hadjar and Bortoleto again, and then just keep them for the long haul. Essentially just hunker down. I'm going to get the money back on Hadjar and Bortoleto eventually when they start rising in price, as long as they don't DNF, right? And maybe get rid of them in the future. With three transfers, I could have done something else, maybe downgrade Piastri or a Mercedes or a Ferrari to something and then upgrading them. But even then, I could only upgrade one of them because I would need to downgrade one of my other assets. Like even downgrading Ocon to like a Bearman wouldn't work because Bearman is like the next asset in value, right? If we look at the next asset that I would be willing to own for this week, it's Bearman at 6.1 million, which at least doesn't have that massive negative to overcome and can quite easily rise in price. I'm willing to buy Bearman, it's just I can't from Hadjar and Bortoleto. So if I could get rid of Hadjar or Bortoleto and upgrade them to Bearman and then just eat the budget loss on one of them, that wouldn't feel as bad. But right now, I feel like I'm kind of forced to go into a -10 route of either downgrading Ferrari, Mercedes, or Piastri. And in that case, I can still only upgrade either Hadjar or Bortoleto. So I'm really struggling to find a route in where a -10 makes sense, because even if I am to take a -10, say I were to downgrade Mercedes to a Williams, for example, which is an asset I'm more than happy to own, and then decide, okay, I want to upgrade Hadjar. I could go up to Alex Albon, which looks fantastic, good trade, but I'm not taking a minus 20. Like at that point, I might as well wildcard. And that's what I have been juggling this entire week. If I'm going to take a bunch of point hits to remove the assets that I want to remove from my team, I might as well just wildcard. And I made an entire wildcard and limitless guide video yesterday. So if you haven't watched that yet and you are considering using the wildcard or the limitless chip, definitely go and watch that video, because that video goes over what I think the best limitless and the best wildcard chip is, and what type of teams you should have to consider using them. And I'm definitely in the category of considering using the wildcard. Now, again, I don't think Mercedes plus Ferrari is bad. I don't think Piastri is bad. I don't think my team is that bad for points either. It's just, I'm just going to keep decreasing in budget. And especially early on in the season, when we are expecting the budget games to be quite crazy after the third and fourth race of the season, and especially once we get rid of those massive negatives from Australia, if I can get ahead of the budget now, will that be worth it? And especially for the wild card, will that be worth using the wild card already this season? And the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm leaning towards yes, that I just should use the wild card and try and get ahead of things. Try and right the ship already, get some budget back in, and then once those cheap assets have decreased in price, once in China and maybe once again in Japan, if they have like just an average middle of the road 2-3 pointer in China, I could definitely see both Hadjar, Bortoleto, Doohan, all of those drivers that DNF'd in Australia decreased 0.6 million in China and 0.6 million again in Japan. Once that has passed and that massive negative score from Australia has passed, I can buy them back and then build a sort of powerhouse two premium constructor team. I'm really tempted to go for it. With that, though, I need to consider what type of team I want to build on the wildcard. And if you watched the video yesterday of the best wildcard teams, there really are two options. The one option is to go for McLaren plus Williams. I think McLaren are the most guaranteed team to increase 0.3 million every single race. They get a lot of points. Williams look really good for both points and price increases. And then from there on out, you go for something like Piastri. I cannot afford Alex Albon, unfortunately, because in that case, I would need to pick one of the cheap drivers, which is what I'm trying to avoid here. And you can see, like, with this team, I can get to this sort of team on a minus 20. So do I really want to get Gabriel Bortoleto in there when I can avoid this? I think in my team that I would build on the wild card, if this is what I'm going for, I would just try and upgrade these and go for something like Yuki Tsunoda in here, who once again looks quite good in qualifying, and the car looks good if VCarb can sort their strategy out. So maybe something like this is what I would go for on a wild card. Obviously, I would like to have Alex Albon in there. I just cannot really afford it. But the more I'm looking at this, I'm like, but I'm getting Yuki Tsunoda in there. I'm getting Oscar Piastri. I can get McLaren Williams later. And the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, should I just go for budget building for 2 races and then after Japan reassess, right? Maybe just do try and just make one transfer in Japan, and then have 3 free transfers available to overhaul the team after Japan. And what I would do then is basically just try and pray for some backmarker points in the sprint. And looking at the sprint quali, you had both Alpine drivers finishing low, which, I don't really want to go for the Alpine. You had Liam Lawson going out, which again, too expensive probably to go for that. I'm considering the Kick Sauber. I know this is crazy. Williams is definitely a lock in there if I go for 2 cheap constructors. Kick Sauber, Bortoleto can keep it on track from P14. Hulkenberg starting quite far back. I don't really want to go for Alpine, even though I think they can, get a couple of points in there. I mainly want to do this for the price increase. And Sauber does not need a lot. Like, Sauber on 3 points, I think I can't remember exactly now, but as long as they don't get a DNF, they're going to increase in price. The more I know, I never said, I said earlier in the season, before the season started, that Kick Sauber is like the D tier, the F tier asset of the game. But I'm considering it, and like I obviously I could go for something like an Aston Martin as well. But the main allure with going for two cheap constructors now is that in a sprint weekend, I can see a world in which a cheaper constructor gets a couple of more points compared to what they would in their normal weekend due to the points that they can gain in the sprint. Maybe Kickstarter is not the one for it. Maybe it's Aston Martin with Lance Stroll up in the top 10. But what I can do with the drivers when I go for two cheap constructors is very, very appealing. Imagine I go in with these premium drivers here, all of them near guaranteed to increase the maximum price. I know I just said Kickstarter, but let's just assume it's Aston Martin or Haas. I'll put Haas in there for now. And then we get past China, we get past Japan. I only use one transfer in Japan if one of these guys DNF'd and are looking unlikely to rise in price. The only thing I'm kind of stuck with here is Williams. For Albon, I can easily downgrade. If Albon needs to DNF and he looks unlikely to rise in price in Japan, I can easily just downgrade him to like an Ocon. There's a lot of drivers below Albon that are easy to get to. If Kimi Antonelli were to DNF, again, super easy. I can just go for Sainz if Sainz looks good. Again, Haas, if Haas has a DNF that I don't want Haas anymore, I can easily switch it to an Aston Martin or an Alpine, even with, with the budget dropping, with 1.6 million in the bank. I'm very flexible with this team. And then, once we get past Japan, basically run this team for 2 weeks. We get past Japan with 3 transfers. I can just sell Haas, sell Antonelli, sell Norris. And at that point, with the price increases, maybe I can afford to go for a team with McLaren, Williams, and Albon that I, remember I showed you. And also then I can pick one of the cheap drivers, right? So just basic price increases, we can go back to this. And obviously now I can't afford it because I have Stroll and Albon in here. But after Hadjar and Bortoleto have dropped another 1.2 million in price, I can afford them in here. Plus, my assets would have increased in price. So then I'm suddenly sitting there with Piastri, Albon, Stroll, Hülkenberg, McLaren, Williams, and I can rock with McLaren Williams for a bit. And then after that, after a couple more races have passed, and maybe we'll get to like Monaco, where I'm likely to want 2 premium constructors. If I go into that weekend with 3 premiums and a more budget, now I can maybe decide to sell McLaren or keep McLaren and even begin running like McLaren plus Mercedes outfits, right? McLaren plus Mercedes, and have enough budget to still afford something like a Piastri in there and just start downgrading the likes of Stroll to those cheaper drivers that have dropped 1.2 million in price after China and Japan. And considering my points are so bad already, why not? And the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm talking myself into doing this. I have decided that I'm going to wildcard. That is happening. I've just not yet decided if I want to go for like the Piastri, McLaren plus Williams build, or if I want to go for the fun 2 cheap constructor build. And again, the reason why I think I'm going to go for the budget building one on this team, on my team 1, is because my team 2, which I'm not going to show you now, was a team that started with Piastri, Williams, and McLaren. So that team doesn't have to wildcard. I can just move some drivers around on that team with free transfers. And as such, I'm like protected. So if this team that I started, team 1, does badly and is super far behind, and the points I lost can't catch up, I do have my second team to fall back on as my Williams McLaren build for the next 2 races. So that's what I'm considering. I think it's kind of crazy, but at this point, after such a crazy start to the season, I feel like I kind of have to go crazy. Now, am I going Kick Sauber crazy? I don't know. Am I going Haas crazy? Maybe. Or am I just going for Aston Martin? I think either of those 3 would work well. The reason why I like to, either of the cheaper ones is because if, my entire team DNFs again, I would have options to move them out. But that's the plan currently. Literally pick the overperforming drivers. Norris starting further back in the sprint qualifying can definitely gain some positions. Antonelli, again, doesn't really have to do anything points-wise. I don't care what he does as long as he doesn't DNF. He's fine. Alexander Albon looks super fast, outperforming Sainz. and is also very likely to increase in price. Lance Stroll is performing really well, out-qualified Alonso, and I know that's not really what we're looking for in the sprint qualifying, but again, as long as he can avoid the DNF in one of the two races, he should be fine. And then Nico Hulkenberg looks fantastic, starting far back in the sprint qualifying as well. And then just one of the cheap constructors in here, and I'm going to just lock this in for now. I'm going to DRS boost on Norris, confirm, and we're going to use the wildcard. I've decided to use the wildcard here. This is the team I'm rocking with right now. That may change once we get to the deadline stream tomorrow. So definitely do not miss that. We'll see if this is what I end up doing. I'm going to click continue now and confirm wildcard activated. Whew. I'll see you in the deadline stream tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.